Oral questions. Questions orales. The honourable member for Regina Capel.
What a mess. Yesterday was a gong show at the bottom of a dumpster fire, wrapped up in a cluster. The finance minister resigns, the prime minister hides all day and then has to beg his MPs not to fire him. But the worst news, buried underneath it all, was a devastating gut punch to Canadian taxpayers. A $62 billion deficit smashing through the already insane $40 billion guardrail. Canada is a serious G7 NATO partner staring down the threat of 25% tariffs. We deserve a strong leader with a new mandate. Why not let Canadians decide by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking the Opposition House Leader for his heartfelt congratulations on my new role. I want to tell him, Mr. Speaker, and all Canadians, that our government is very proud of the fall economic statement that we made public yesterday. Mr. Speaker, the fall economic statement speaks to growth in the Canadian economy. It speaks to supporting Canadians with serious affordability challenges. It speaks to a declining debt to GDP ratio, the best in the G7. And Mr. Speaker, we haven't finished supporting Canadians, something the Conservatives aren't interested in doing.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Well, I'd like to congratulate the new finance minister for being the fourth finance minister in a 24-hour period. But it's the same old talking points. What they did yesterday was smash through that $40 billion guardrail. What does that mean? It now means that Canadians have to pay back all that money with interest, and 43 cents of every dollar you earn now has to go to pay the tax burden. More money to bankers and bondholders. In fact, the government's now spending more on the interest on that debt than on health care. But the Prime Minister doesn't care. He doesn't worry about where the money comes from. He's never had to worry about that. So why not let Canadians decide their future by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect their government to be focused on their economic concerns. They expect their government to be focused on the real threat that 25% tariffs across the board would mean to the Canadian economy. That's the work that our government's doing. I can report, Mr. Speaker, I had an encouraging preliminary conversation with the Foreign Affairs Minister yesterday, with the Border Czar, with Mr. Homan. We look forward to working with the incoming administration on border security, something that the fall economic statement generously supported yesterday. This is the work Canadians expect us to be focused on, and we're looking forward to doing that work.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Yeah, they were so proud of that fall budget that they tabled it in the House and then ran and hid for the rest of the day. But let's recap. The Prime Minister announced $250 checks and then had to cancel them. He announced a 2-month GST tax trick that businesses say they won't implement, and the Prime Minister now says is optional. A broken immigration system, Parliament seized with a $400 million corruption scandal, all the while 2 million food bank visits, doubled housing costs, record high consumer debt, the dollar below 70 cents, and the Prime Minister raising prices by quadrupling the carbon tax. Yes. Again, why not let Canadians decide their future by calling a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and for Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, as I said a moment ago, we're proud of the fiscal and economic record of this government. This is a record, Mr. Speaker, of supporting Canadians through the pandemic. This is a record of investing in entrepreneurship and innovation. This is a record in providing, for example, Canadians with $10 a day childcare, historic investments to speak to not only affordability issues, but growing the economy in a sustainable way. Mr. Speaker, this is work we're proud to continue to do for Canadians, and we find it unfortunate that it's the opposition that's trying to ground this House of Commons into chaos.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg. Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his ministers, of Liberal MPs and of Canadians, but he continues to cling to power. He and his top economic advisor, Mark Carney, forced the former finance minister to blow past her already out-of-control $40 billion fiscal guardrail, which was already out of control, as I said, and forced her to run a whopping $62 billion deficit. This Prime Minister has added more to the national debt than all Prime Ministers before him combined. This profligate spending contributes to inflation. People are suffering. When will he call an election? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, the fall economic statement was tabled in the House of Commons yesterday. It is an economic statement which talks about economic growth and supporting Canadians through difficult times with a high cost of living. The economic statement also discusses our responsibility to use taxpayer money and responsibly, to spend it responsibly. And, Mr. Speaker, that is exactly what we will continue to do, all while keeping an eye on exactly what support Canadians need from their national government. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. How can we believe the new finance minister? How can we have confidence in what he is saying when yesterday he wasn't even able to answer a journalist's question, what is the national debt of Canada? Now, the former finance minister said in her letter yesterday, and this is very important, I quote, "We need to keep our fiscal powder dry today so we have the reserves that we may need for a coming tariff war." That means eschewing costly political gimmicks, which we can ill afford and which make Canadians doubt that we recognize the gravity of the moment, unquote. That was her message, the message of the former finance minister to the prime minister, who never listens to anyone. Call an election now. The Honourable Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, our colleague has mentioned the government's deficit, but he knows that our debt to GDP ratio is declining, and we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio of all G7 countries. My colleague also knows that this government will support Canadians through difficult times. We've helped with $10 a day daycare. We've helped with the dental care program. Conservatives, in fact, voted against all of these programs. This is the time to support Canadians. We will continue to do so, and we will do so responsibly, as always. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, I do congratulate the new Minister of Finance on his appointment. That said, there have been crises shaking this government for a long time, just crisis after crisis. Now there is a bad economic statement. We have a huge deficit. We also have money that the government should not have given out, that it cannot recoup. Now, we need to be strong in negotiating with the United States in the context of a significant political and economic crisis. How can this government still think it has the authority and legitimacy to do so? The Honourable Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, I thank the Bloc Québécois leader for his congratulations. Our government is legitimate because our government has the confidence of the House of Commons. The House gave the government its confidence several times last week. As the Bloc Québécois leader said, we are still prioritizing supporting Canadians through tough times. We are also focusing on working with the Trump administration, which will come into office in January. We will work with them to reduce or even eliminate the threat of tariffs. We will protect our borders, and we will ensure that our economy succeeds and thrives. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. The government does not have the confidence of this House. It does not enjoy the confidence of the House. It enjoys the NDP's weakness. That said, if the government feels legitimate in negotiating on Canada's behalf in a potentially very dire crisis for Canada, then why doesn't the government seek the support and confidence of Canadians with this leader or with another? In January, that can happen in January. They need the support of Canadians, and if they don't have it, then bye-bye. The Honourable Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, once again, Canadians expect that their federal government, working, of course, with provincial governments, work hard to protect the economy from the threat of tariffs. That's exactly what we have done since the dinner we had with President Trump in Florida. I must inform colleagues, Mr. Speaker, that I had some very encouraging and positive exchanges with Mr. Leitnik, Secretary of Commerce. Yesterday, as I said, we spoke with Mr. Holman, who is responsible for the borders. They're very open-minded, and I find it very positive. We will continue this good work.
For Burnaby South.
People are right to be angry. We've got a Prime Minister who's more interested in protecting his own job than he is in protecting Canadians against a threat.
I'm going to ask the honourable members, in particular the honourable member from Miramichi Grand Lake and the member from Dufferin-Caledon, please, to take their voices. I'm going to invite the honourable member from Burnaby South to start his question again.
People are right to be angry. They've got a Prime Minister who's more interested in protecting his own job than defending Canadians against Trump. We've got a Prime Minister who has failed to defend workers from rich CEOs that the Conservatives love, who continue to rip off Canadians and drive up the cost of food and homes. The Prime Minister has failed. For New Democrats, it's always workers first and not CEOs. And not CEOs who the Conservatives want to defend. So will the Prime Minister acknowledge he has failed? He has to quit.
Order, please. The honourable minister, rather, and leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this House voted in confidence of this government just last week on multiple occasions. Mr. Speaker, we have important work to do on behalf of Canadians. We have a very important relationship to manage with the United States at a pivotal time, Mr. Speaker, and that is exactly what this government is focused on doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Burnaby Sud.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
On protecting CEOs to the harm of workers. The
Prime Minister is working harder to defend his own job than to defend Canadians from Donald Trump's threats. The Prime Minister failed to defend workers from CEOs who are taking all the money. This Prime Minister needs to protect workers, not CEOs. The Prime Minister has failed. Will he resign? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the NDP leader knows full well that last week we earned the confidence of this House on several occasions. Our government always works to protect Canadians, Canadian jobs, and the Canadian economy. Now, we're focused on that, and we are focused on properly managing our relations with the United States. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yesterday, the fall economic statement confirmed what former finance minister, the budget officer, and the Globe and Mail already told us, that this weak and now wounded prime minister hijacked the statement to drive Canada through the fiscal guardrail and over a cliff. $62 billion in overspending. That's 50% higher than their own target set just months ago. They told us over and over again that the deficit wouldn't exceed $40 billion. Simple question. Why did they mislead Canadians again?
Yeah, way to go.
The Honourable Minister of Finance and for Intergovernmental Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, far from misleading Canadians, the government thinks it's important to be transparent in terms of the fiscal picture of the government. That's why, Mr. Speaker, based on legal advice and accounting practices, the government booked contingent liabilities that increase the initial deficit projection to the level that my colleague referred to. Mr. Speaker, this is about righting historical wrongs with Indigenous peoples, something the previous government, Conservative government, ignored. And Mr. Speaker, we think the responsible thing to do is to be transparent with Canadians. That's exactly what we did.
That's right.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, of the Liberal ministers that still remain, not a single one would stick around yesterday to even defend the statement. They dropped it here and then ran out the door. $62 billion of new debt and new inflationary spending for Canadians to pay on their grocery bills, on their home heating, and on everything else. That's equivalent to spending $1 every second for nearly 2,000 years. The Prime Minister has clearly lost control of his caucus. He's lost control of his cabinet. He's now lost control of spending. So when will he give Canadians the chance to weigh in and call a carbon tax election?
That's right. Way to go, Melissa.
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, we have no lessons to learn from the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker. On the eve of Christmas, what we presented to Canadians, Mr. Speaker, it's no time for slogan. It's no time for smiles, Mr. Speaker. This is time for us to be serious. What the Minister of Finance presented yesterday was a fall economic statement which is focused on growth, investment in our workers, investment in our industry, and investment in Canada. Mr. Speaker, you know what? Because confident countries invest in themselves, something that the Conservative could not understand. We'll stand for Canadians. We'll stand for Canada on this side of the House.
The Honourable Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, who is in charge of the clattering train? The Prime Minister has lost the confidence of Canadians, and now he's lost the confidence of his MPs and his cabinet. He's focused not on Canadians, but on himself as he clings to power. Yesterday, the government posted a $62 billion deficit, blowing through the guardrails. The government is careening out of control. Things are in complete chaos. When will we get an election?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what the Conservative opposition is doing is they are focused on us while we are focused on Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We are focused on ensuring that we are delivering affordability measures for Canadians at a difficult time. We are focused on ensuring that we have a strong relationship with our most important trading partner, the United States. That is what this government is squarely focused on: Canadians, protecting the Canadian economy and protecting Canadian jobs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, not only did the statement post a $62 billion deficit, it revised 2025 growth down, and it revised 2025 unemployment up. The Prime Minister has failed to recognize the gravity of the moment. He's focused not on Canadians, but on himself. His government is in utter and complete chaos. So when will the Prime Minister realize that the end is here, that his government and this Parliament is dead, and call an election?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, we have the lowest debt and deficit in the G7, Mr. Speaker, and in addition, in the fall economic statement, Canadians can see supports for affordable housing, supports for $10 a day childcare, supports for public servants who want early retirement, Mr. Speaker, because on this side of the House, what do? We support Canadians as opposed to what they do, which is cut, cut, cut.
L'honorable député de Louis Saint.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, we do, of course, congratulate the new Finance Minister. Just 9 years ago, in 2015, he, the Prime Minister, and everyone on that side of the House, they were elected promising 3 small deficits, and then in 2019, a $0 deficit. Then, a few years later, he posts the worst deficit in Canadian history, $62 billion. How can he look people in the eye and tell them that everything's going well? Can he, the new minister, tell the Prime Minister that he needs to call an election to determine whether or not he deserves the confidence of Canadians?
Ministre des Finances.
The Honourable Minister of Finance and of Intergovernmental Affairs. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for the congratulations. Now, Mr. Speaker, it will come as no surprise to you that we do not share his pessimism. We have a lot of confidence in the Canadian economy, in Canadian workers, and in the fall economic statement, which gave Canadians a lot of hope, especially as regards support to them during tough economic times. We've also announced very significant investments. I'm excited to talk more about them this afternoon. For instance, we are investing in our border to protect Canadians and also work with our American partners. We're here for Canadians. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, it's Finance 101. A deficit is money that you don't have. 62 billion is money that we don't have. It's money that we're punting down the road to our children, grandchildren, and great-children who haven't even been born yet. They will have to pay for today's poor financial management. All Canadians knows that the Prime Minister is alone in his bubble. Canada has never before had a Prime Minister so narcissistic, selfish, and full of himself. The problem, though, is that all Canadians, even those who haven't even been born yet, are going to have to pay for his poor management. When will there be an election so we can elect a good, strong, Conservative government? The Honourable Minister of Finance and of Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, it will come as no surprise to our colleague that we disagree with the idea of having a Conservative government which would cut and gut the programs that support Canadians. They voted against our $10 a day daycare program to help Canadian families. They voted against the Canada Dental Plan. Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect a responsible government. We're focused on supporting Canadians through economically, financially challenging times. This is what our government is doing. The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Well, with a $62 billion deficit, we can all agree that it's no time to be offering election goodies. Yet, in yesterday's economic statement, 98% of the new money to combat the rising cost of living is the GST holiday. Worse still, this purely electoral measure represents almost everything the government is doing to tackle the cost of living between now and 2030. This 2-month tax break, which the former finance minister described as a costly political gimmick, well, this is the Liberals' long-term economic vision. If that's the long-term economic vision, do they understand now why Quebecers are calling for an election? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives have been talking about elections and only elections since December. We have been supporting Canadians and Quebecers since 2015. That's why, for example, we put forward the Canada Dental Care Plan. It helps 1 million Quebecers. It gives them dental insurance that most of them never had before. Unfortunately, both the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois insist on being against the Canada Dental Care Plan. And in fact, the Conservative leader claims it doesn't even exist. The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, it's very simple. The Quebecers, in fact, never wanted the GST holiday. What's more, the GST holiday is downright harmful to our small and medium enterprises. Yet it's the only element of the economic update to deal with the rising cost of living. And it accounts for 98% of new spending. The Liberals are out of steam. They've run out of ideas, and they're running out of resources, human resources, after the resignation of the finance minister, who is joining 8 other Liberal ministers who are jumping ship. Quebecers deserve better than a government that's falling apart and crumbling before their very eyes. Will the Prime Minister finally call an election? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. I think it's very obvious that the Bloc Québécois is against cutting taxes. But had they read the fall economic statement, they would know that we've created over 330,000 jobs in Canada. Well-paying jobs, Mr. Speaker. Canada has experienced the highest salary growth of all G7 countries. Canadians are bringing home paychecks that are 5% bigger, even after accounting for inflation, Mr. Speaker. We are making sure that Canadians' paychecks increase, Mr. Speaker. I'm hearing a lot of noise from the back of the room. I hope that not everyone will start talking without having been recognized by the chair. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquis-Angers. Once upon a time, economic statements contained measures. Today, they just contain bad news. What a contrast between the enthusiasm of 2015 and the cynical electioneering deficits of 2024. What a contrast between the solidarity of 2015 and the ministers who are jumping ship one by one. What a contrast between the Prime Minister who was a superstar in 2015 and the Prime Minister who tonight will struggle to get people out for his Christmas party. Mr. Speaker, it's over. That's it. That's all. It's over. Will the Prime Minister call an election? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised to hear my colleague talk like that. In the fall economic statement, if he had in fact taken the time to read it, there are significant investments for Quebec in the statement. For example, artificial intelligence, which will be at the very heart of the 21st century economy. As you know, Montreal has the most startups of anywhere in Canada, and in the statement there are investments for Quebec, for industries, for workers. Mr. Speaker, we expect each and every member of Parliament to celebrate Canada. It's time to celebrate Canada. Thank you.
Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
The Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his caucus, of his cabinet, and of Canadians. The Deputy Prime Minister resigned because the Prime Minister said that he had lost confidence in her. A minister must speak on behalf of the Prime Minister, and with his full confidence in making your decision, you made clear, I no longer credibly enjoy that confidence. Just last week, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was talking about how Americans have lost the ability for females to lead in that country. But the Prime Minister only uses females when it's useful for him. Isn't that right, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
No.
Honourable Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his cabinet, of his caucus, and Canadians. He blew through the $61.9 billion deficit over the $40 billion guardrails that he had set. The finance minister, she tried to warn him, and he fired her for trying to warn him. He offered her another position, and she refused. Why is it that this Prime Minister only has confidence in women until they question him? Exactly.
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives keep bandying about the word feminism, but let's talk about tangible policies that are offered in the fall economic statement for women. $50 million to build more shelter spaces across this country, Mr. Speaker. $15 million for women's organizations whose goal it is to end gender-based violence, as well as permanent funding for the Sexual and Reproductive Health Fund. This is what it looks like to have the backs of women. Conservatives know nothing about that.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
This Prime Minister has lost confidence of his cabinet, of his Liberal MPs, of Canadians as he clings to power. Hours before she was set to release the fall economic statement, the former finance minister quit, saying, quote, on Friday you told me you no longer want me to serve as your finance minister and offered me another position in cabinet, unquote. The fake feminist Prime Minister and the conflict of interest carbon tax Carney forced the former finance minister to blow through the $40 billion guardrail with a massively irresponsible $62 billion deficit, making her take the blame. Will this fake feminist Prime Minister take responsibility for his economic vandalism and call an election?
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
Mr. Speaker, if Conservatives want to talk about feminism, then let's look at some facts. Let's look at some policies that actually support women across this country. Policies like $10 a day childcare. Policies like the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence, which was actually supported in our latest economic statement, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives, by the way, opposed every single one of these measures. On this side of the House, we will always support women. Who knows what's going on over there?
Bravo. The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, this Prime Minister has lost confidence of his cabinet, his Liberal MPs, and Canadians as he clings to power. The former Finance Minister said, quote, "To be effective, a minister must speak on behalf of the Prime Minister and with his full confidence. In making your decision, you made clear that I no longer credibly enjoy that confidence and possess the authority that comes with it." It is clear that this fake feminist Prime Minister threw the former Finance Minister under the bus, just as he did with other women who previously stood up to him. Will this fake feminist Prime Minister take responsibility for his economic vandalism and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are distracting from the fact that the Bank of Canada has cut interest rates 5 times down to 3.25%. Yesterday, our government published the fall economic statement, and I'm happy to share, Mr. Speaker, that it is an investment of $189 million into the Black Entrepreneurship Program that has already helped 16,000 Black entrepreneurs across this country. We are going to be investing in digital adoption for small and medium-sized enterprises of $500 million. We're going to reduce red tape. And, Mr. Speaker, while we're shopping during the GST holiday, let's support local. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
The caregivers pilot programs expired back in June. The minister promised caregivers permanent residence on arrival. 6 months later, no information, no application process has been released about this new pilot. Given the Liberals' about-face on regularization and scapegoating of migrants for their failures, caregivers are really concerned that their hard-fought promise of landed status on arrival will be forgotten. Will the minister deliver on this promise and open the pathway for applications by January 1st, 2025, or will this be another Liberal broken promise?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and
Thank you,
Refugees.
Mr. Speaker. Caregivers are extremely important to this country and to the care that they provide to our most vulnerable. We are still tracking to launch this, and clearly this is a priority of the government. This is on track. We may have some modifications to make, but this is still a high priority of the government. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
The Liberals' economic update failed to recognize the reality facing working Canadians. It failed to address the housing crisis. It failed to address the healthcare crisis. It failed to address the youth jobs crisis. Instead of fighting for Canadians, Liberals are fighting with themselves. And Conservatives only propose cuts that will hurt workers while big business gets tax breaks and handouts. Budgets reveal who governments are really working for. Why are Liberals, like Conservatives, working for CEOs while ignoring everyone else?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that honourable member would know because we worked very well together to create a national pharmacare plan that's going to make sure that Canadians everywhere have access to the medication they need. And it builds upon a Canadian advantage that we need to maintain, an advantage that sees Canadians not only living longer, but living 6 years more in health than they do in the United States. The lifespan that we enjoy is every bit as important as every other measurement. And the advantage that we have in health cannot be lost. We must continue to drive forward and transform our health system from one based in illness to one based in prevention.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, last week the government of Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec announced a historic agreement on Churchill Falls, as well as an agreement to develop the Gull Island project and upgrade other hydroelectric assets. This deal has the potential to transform Newfoundland and Labrador, create tens of thousands of jobs, and sweeping economic spin-offs. Can the Minister of Rural Economic Development inform Canadians how our government helped create the economic conditions to make this deal possible?
The Honourable Minister for Rural Economic Development.
Speaker, after decades, Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec have signed an historic agreement that will have huge benefits for all. Our government is working towards a net zero electricity grid and provided Newfoundlanders and Labradorians with assistance on rate mitigation. That, along with the investment tax credits for net zero projects, help create the conditions for this agreement to make Newfoundland and Labrador an economic and energy powerhouse. I congratulate both premiers on this historic deal, and I can't wait to see the shovels in the ground.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost confidence of his cabinet, his caucus, and all Canadians as he desperately clings to power. Yesterday, the Liberals dropped their fall economic statement and literally ran out of the House. A $62 billion deficit, missing their target by a whopping 55%. The end result? Canadians are now paying more on debt interest charges than on health care. When will this Prime Minister end the misery, call a carbon tax election, so Conservatives can finally fix what they have broken?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity to inform the Justice Critic that, in fact, in that fall economic statement, he would have seen a series of measures that address community safety in our communities across the country. He would have seen measures that crack down on auto theft. He would have seen stricter bail and sentencing provisions. He would have seen provisions in the sex offender registries to get tough on child sex predators. He would have seen securing our borders to provide confidence to our American counterparts, cracking down on money laundering and terrorist financing. These are all measures that we all have an interest in promoting, passing, and getting funded in this country to keep Canadians safe.
The honourable member for Brantford Brant.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister's economic vandalism and inflationary spending, he has added more to the debt than all previous Prime Ministers combined. Now Canadians are paying more. Our national debt now sits at $1.24 trillion, an astronomical number that our future generations will have to deal with. Canada's promise of powerful paychecks, affordable housing, safe streets have all been shattered under the NDP Liberals. This Prime Minister has lost confidence of his caucus, the House, and Canadians. When will he call an immediate carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, that member is a former Crown attorney. He knows in terms of keeping communities safe, it starts with addressing the prolific amount of guns that are in our communities. What's in that fall economic statement? $597 million to take weapons off of our streets. What else is in there? Mr. Speaker, that member knows that organized criminality is a problem in Canada from coast to coast to coast. What we are doing with organized criminality is ensuring tougher penalties for financial crimes, cracking down on money laundering, and cracking down on terrorist financing. You get at the cause of the problem when you address the money flow. That's what we're doing in the fall economic statement. We wish we could have their support.
The honourable member for Chicoutimi-Le Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his ministers, of his MPs, and of Canadians. But despite all of that, he is obstinately clinging to power. After 9 years of economic vandalism and inflationary spending, he's accumulated more debt than all of his predecessors put together. Result, Canadians are now paying $53.7 billion in interest on the debt. That's more than they pay every year for health transfers, Mr. Speaker. I'll say it again, more than for health transfers. Can the Prime Minister set his ego aside, think about Canadians, and call an election? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I would invite my colleague to read the fall economic statement, because if he were to do that, he would see that Canada is in a particularly good financial position compared to all of its G7 counterparts. They're expecting great economic growth next year. We've signed an agreement with the government of Quebec for hundreds of millions of dollars to help the forestry sector in his region, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives hadn't said a word about that. When it's time to help Canadians, they are never present. The honourable member for Chicoutimi-Le Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his ministers, of his MPs, and of Canadians. As if the $40 billion guardrail wasn't enough, well, they've given us a fall economic statement with a deficit of $62 billion. So much for the guardrail. Canadians are paying more in interest on the debt than they're paying for health care. He is desperately clinging to power. Enough is enough. When's the election? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More good news for Quebecers today with the publication of the Clean Electricity Strategy. That's hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to be invested in collaboration with Hydro-Quebec, with the Government of Quebec, and with businesses to develop the electric system that we'll need for the future to decarbonize our transit sector, to decarbonize industry and buildings. That's how we're going to build the economy and the jobs and the Canada of the 21st century. The Honourable Member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix. Well, we don't need more than 30 seconds to tell you what the Liberals' record is. The Prime Minister just did one thing this fall, and that's buy time. He bought time by letting the Conservatives paralyze work in the House without ever trying to negotiate a way to get out of this impasse. He bought time with his vote-buying gimmicks. He bought time, and he's continuing to buy time today since his finance minister quit. And doesn't matter what's going on, he buys time. But does he not realize that by doing other than buying time, he's lost the respect of Quebecers? The Honourable... Order. The Honourable Minister of Tourism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. And as she knows very well, we won the confidence of this House several times in the last few weeks, but I would like to maybe mention to her some points in the fall economic statement that she maybe hasn't read yet, but if there's one element that she should be interested in, it's our support for culture, which is in the fall economic statement. Our support for tourism to bring more conventions back to Canada. And Mr. Speaker, we should be proud of the investments that we've made in culture. The Honourable Member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix. Well, this session has been one session too many. The Liberals have monopolized attention, but not thanks to their work. They've refused to work for seniors and for farmers. They've refused to work to get rid of the religious exception. They've refused to work to guarantee Quebecers access to early requests for medical assistance in dying. Unfortunately, they have been focused on internal caucus fights. That's where their attention's been, and that's why the following question is on everybody's lips today. When are we going to get rid of this government that doesn't want to work for Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Tourism. Mr. Speaker, I would just like to highlight that on this side of the House, we are working for Quebecers. On this side of the House, we negotiate with the Government of Quebec to make sure that all the investments that we do are good for Quebecers. I'll just give you a couple of examples. The dental care program, the child care benefit. In the fall economic statement, there are rental help because the federal government pays to help renters. There's also investments in AI, housing, and, Mr. Speaker, it's this government that has done the work.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
This week, Liberal Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his cabinet, of his Liberal MPs and of Canadians, but he still clings to power. And yesterday, the economic statement from his phantom finance minister, Carbon Tax Carney, posted a $62 billion deficit, which is absolutely devastating for Canadians. And they tried to pin it on the finance minister, and she quit in protest. Canadians have had enough of these dirty Liberal backroom deals where Carbon Tax Carney gets all of the power but has none of the accountability. When will these Liberals call a carbon tax election? Because Canadians just can't trust them.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, rather than talking down Canada, let's stress the facts. Inflation has come down to 1.9%, Mr. Speaker. Exactly. We have the lowest debt and the lowest deficit in the G7. In the fall economic statement, we put forward numerous measures to support businesses and families in Canada, including $10 a day childcare, which is going to give rise to 300,000 jobs, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we believe in supporting Canadians while maintaining a prudent fiscal outlook, something the Conservatives could never claim to do. Vive le Canada!
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Just like the 9 years of failures of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians have lost confidence in this Prime Minister, and they showed it last night with the overwhelming majority election of Tamara Jansen in Cloverdale, Langley City. The Phantom Finance Minister posted a $62 billion devastating deficit that Canadians are going to be paying for generations. These Liberals have absolutely lost control, and this flailing Prime Minister doesn't have the confidence of his cabinet, of his caucus, of Canadians. When's he going to call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the fall economic statement yesterday,
Order.
I remember it.
It's important for all members to ensure that they, especially male members, there are particular rules in terms of dress that is in this place. I am not certain that the sweater is a trop, but I'll invite the Honourable Minister perhaps to button up his jacket.
Today, Mr. Speaker, we actually celebrate the 125th anniversary of the Canada Forest Service, which is something that I think all parliamentarians should be able to support. Mr. Speaker, in the fall economic statement were investment tax credits related to electricity production. It is part of building an economy for the future that will create jobs and economic prosperity across this country. It will ensure affordability for consumers. It will ensure reliability of the grid. And today, I am very pleased to say we are launching Canada's first clean electricity strategy across the country and the clean electricity regulation. It is an important day for Canada.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Hills, Grassland.
The Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his cabinet, his Liberal MPs, and Canadians as he is desperately clinging to power. He forced the Finance Minister to join the ghosts of ministers past in favor of Phantom Finance Minister Carbon Tax Carney because they thought that her massive deficit wasn't big enough. With all the chaos he has caused around him, the Prime Minister's own inner circle is abandoning him. He went to the Governor-General yesterday to appoint Carney's placeholder, but why didn't he go one step further and just call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Mr. Speaker, another element of the fall economic statement yesterday was the launch of the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program. That will make Indigenous peoples partners in projects across this country. It is part of building an economy that is inclusive and prosperous on a go-forward basis. On the other side of the House, we have a group that actually are a bunch of climate skeptics and climate deniers who have a plan for the economy that is based on the 1960s and looking backwards. On this side of the House, we are building a future for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We live in an increasingly virtual world, and it's our job to ensure that this online space is safe for our children and all Canadians. That's why our government introduced a plan to do exactly that in the Online Harms Act. Unfortunately, the Conservatives are blocking this important legislation. Their obstruction means that children, women, and minority groups remain in danger. I'm appalled that the Conservatives won't put Canadians before partisan politics and work with us. Can the Minister of Justice explain the consequences we face by not passing the Online Harms Act? Thank you.
For the second time today, I'm going to ask the honourable members from Grand Lake, Miramichi Grand Lake, and from Dufferin-Caledon to please not take the floor unless the Speaker recognizes them. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, last week in this place, the Conservatives blocked the child protection measures in the Online Harms Act from advancing. Worse still, the Conservatives have vowed that if we succeed in passing this legislation with the help of the Bloc and the NDP, they will actually reverse it at the earliest opportunity. What does this mean? That means if we get child sex abuse material off of the internet, if they took power, they would put it back on, Mr. Speaker. I wish I could make this up. That position is morally bankrupt. What I would say is that when you claim to care about victims of abuse, you need to stand up for victims of abuse. I would ask them to please do that.
I'd like to apologize to the honourable member from Miramichi Grand Lake. Apparently he was not the person who had spoken out, not recognised by the term. The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost all control. Not only has the Prime Minister long ago lost the moral authority to govern, the Prime Minister has lost his ability to carry out the basic functions of governing, with the shambolic spectacle of his finance minister resigning hours before she was scheduled to deliver the government's fall economic statement. This is a government in complete and utter chaos. When will the Prime Minister admit that he has lost all control and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, this may be the last opportunity I have to answer a question in the House of Commons as a minister, and I want to take an opportunity to say thank you to everybody back home in my community and all members of this House on both sides of the aisle for an opportunity to engage in debate over the years and to put competing ideas on the table. When it comes to the way that caucuses should operate, I would remind my honourable colleague, as one of the people who's written to advocate for his community to receive funding through the Housing Accelerator Fund, that he's now been banned by his own leader to continue to advocate on behalf of the good people of St. Albert, Edmonton. Mr. Speaker, it has been an honour to serve. I look forward to what the future may hold, and I want to say congratulations to a term well served by all colleagues.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of Canadians, lost the confidence of many of his MPs, and yesterday he lost the confidence of his finance minister. And no wonder, because after 9 years, this Prime Minister has broken everything. He's broken our borders, broken immigration, broken housing, and broken the budget. So, when will the Prime Minister just stop? Stop breaking things, acknowledge that he doesn't have a mandate to continue to govern, and call a carbon tax election.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
The fall economic statement that we tabled yesterday, Mr. Speaker, is about growth, and it's about investing in our business community and in our economy, Mr. Speaker. The accelerated capital cost allowance will ensure that Canadian businesses stay on this side of the border, stay in Canada, that our creation of jobs will continue to increase. 330,000 jobs were created in the last year alone, and these are good-paying jobs, Mr. Speaker. Even accounting for inflation, salaries have risen by 5%, the highest in the G7, Mr. Speaker. We're ensuring that Canadians bring home stronger paychecks and better jobs.
The honourable member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his cabinet, his Liberal MPs, and of Canadians while desperately clinging to power. Yesterday, they found a random Liberal minister to table the disastrous fall economic statement after he fired his finance minister, who wouldn't sign off on smashing through her $40 billion fiscal guardrail, all in order to make room for phantom finance minister Mark Carney. Will the Prime Minister has lost control of his own government. Will he call a carbon tax election today?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the other side of the House, they're big on outreach, but they're really weak on facts. when we talk about Canadians, we want to show that we support them and invest in them. We have the lowest ratio of GDP to debt in the G7. Interest rates have gone down. We've been investing in Canadians. That's what you do as a government, Mr. Speaker. You invest in childcare. You invest in national school food programs. You invest in pharmacare because we invest and fight for Canadians. They will cut and they will talk Canadians down. On this side of the House, we are proud to fight for Canadians every single day.
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, children in Canada need protection from online harm. The abuse that occurs online is endangering our kids, and it's time we act to prevent more families from being harmed. Our government has risen to this challenge, putting forward a plan to help parents and children. C-63, the Online Harms Act, creates safety measures that will save lives. The Conservatives are now the only roadblock to making the bill a reality in Canada. Mr. Speaker, the safety of our children should not be political. Can the Minister of Justice please discuss the importance of this critical legislation and why we need it passed now? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, this legislation will literally save children's lives. I find it very difficult to comprehend how the official opposition Conservatives can bear being the only party in this House obstructing the advancement of this legislation. I would share a question that was posed at committee by a mother whose child suffered horrendous abuse. She asked, quote, "What kind of person doesn't want to protect the future of our children or grandchildren?" End quote. Mr. Speaker, once again, I implore the official opposition to look beyond their self-interest and look at these parents and their children in the eye who need help. It's time we pass the Online Harms Act with unanimous consent.
Order. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has a shortage of family doctors. It's an acute crisis that is getting more and more severe each and every day. The Liberals seem to be focused on their own internal problems while parents are looking to get care for their sick kids. The former Deputy Prime Minister said as much yesterday when she resigned. And the Conservatives, sadly, just want to cut health care, cut health services and destroy public health care. Given the emergency, what is the Liberal government's plan to address this shortage and make sure we have more family doctors now in Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we have done is signed agreements with every province and every territory. We saw in the CIHI baseline data last year that nearly every jurisdiction in the country saw more doctors, more nurses. It's not enough, but provinces have to do their part and have to be responsible for this health transformation. But I'll tell you, there's something huge this Parliament can do, and that's pass Bill C-72, which is a connected care legislation. Just one example of allowing something like AI Scribe to be used in our system would create the equivalent of 1,000 new doctors in a very short period of time. Connected care can open up new avenues of care, and that's something this Parliament can do.
The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Well, thanks to this Prime Minister, our nation has become the laughing stock of the narcissist at Mar-a-Lago. Our country is facing an unprecedented level of political coercion, and Canadians deserve a strong and proud defence of our values and our jobs. We're not going to get that from the Liberal gong show or from the predatory and pusillanimous Conservatives who'd sell us out in a second. Our NDP leader called for a war room, bringing together Labour, business, leaders to defend Canada. So will the Liberals stop their squabbling? It's time to drop the gloves, go over the boards, and fight for our country instead of fighting amongst themselves.
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for that question. Yesterday, we tabled the fall economic statement, and I think this is an area where the honourable member and I would agree. The Canada-U.S. relationship is extremely important, and in the fall economic statement, we are strengthening the regime to prohibit forced labor in our supply chains, something that is really important for workers in our country, and to strengthen this trade relationship with our allies in the United States. Thanks so much, Mr. Speaker.
And so brings to an end to question period.